shall I have expectations considering the stakeholders are the ones जिन्हें responsibility दी जा रही है, the beneficiaries rather are the ones जिन्हें responsibility दी जा रही है to make these reforms. Do we even expect that the political parties would have any genuine interest in privatizing those organizations and losing that vote bank that they have through the people they've employed there?
Thank you.
And secondly, इसी subject पे, how about the subject of downsizing the holy cow, if you will? Do I, as a common man, should I have any practical expectations या वो मैं ना ही समझूं वाली बात है? ये मेरा सवाल है basically.
I think, and please don't mind if I'm, going to say something which is hurt. लोग बांधेंगे जी. The way you elect your governments. अगर आपने कभी ये सोच लिया कि ये जिसको हम वोट देने जा रहे हैं इसमें ये एबिलिटी है ये गवर्न करने की, या ये जब पिछली मर्तबा था तो इसने क्या किया था, तो आई थिंक यू विल स्टार्ट एंड देन आस्क फॉर ए प्रोग्राम. We are 2 months from the elections. Has anybody seen any program of any political party which talks about the problems of today? No. So sir, very simple answer is, मुझे अब वो नज़र नहीं आ रहे जिन्होंने ये क्वेश्चन किया था, ये आपने बांधनी है गले में घंटी, मैंने बांधनी है, हम सब लोगों ने मिलके बांधनी है, और ये कोई मुश्किल नहीं है, बड़े आराम से बन जाएगी जिस दिन हम लोगों ने ये फैसला कर लिया.
क्यों ना हम इस चीज़ को एक्सेलरेट करें और एटलीस्ट प्रेपरेशन कर लें जो बड़े जो एंटरप्राइजेज़ हैं, ताकि जब इलेक्टेड गवर्नमेंट आए तो उनके लिए फिर आसान हो इसको एक्सपेडाइट करना.
तैयारी तो की जा सकती है, वेरी राइट, एंड दैट इज एग्जैक्टली सर व्हाट वी आर ट्राइंग टू डू. वी आर जस्ट गोइंग टू प्राइवेटाइज व्हाटएवर इट इज पॉसिबल टू प्राइवेटाइज ड्यूरिंग दिस टाइम. उसके अलावा जिनके ऊपर कुछ काम हो रहा है या कुछ हो रहा है, कुछ एरियाज ऐसे हैं जिस पे हम थोड़ी सी कोशिश करें जल्दी करने की, इसलिए कि हमारा ये फीलिंग है कि ये बर्डन शायद पॉलिटिकल गवर्नमेंट्स नहीं उठा सकेंगी, तो उनको इस बोझ से अगर हम विद इन द फ्रेमवर्क ऑफ लॉ अगर हम उनको आज़ाद कर सकें तो ज़रूर कर दें. शायद उनके लिए ये करना बहुत मुश्किल हो जाए.
Do we have a kind of an inventory or list of people who can actually, अगर आप प्राइवेटाइज करने जाएं तो कौन आएगा उसको गवर्न करने के लिए, कौन हेड करेगा?
रजिस्ट्री तो है जी. SECP maintains a list of over 4,200 people who have been declared fit and proper to be members of the board of governors of various organizations, both private and public sector. They don't differentiate in it. They say that this person has the right background, academic or professional, that he can be nominated to a board and run it. तो 4,200 लोगों का है. अब जब आती है बात SOEs की, तो believe me, for the last 6 weeks I'm trying to form a board for PIA, and anybody who I think can be a good member of the board of directors for the transition period, because it is not somebody who's going to stay there for 3 years. None of them is actually willing to be on the board of directors. And this is true about all the state-owned enterprises. People do not want to be on the board of directors because of a variety of reasons. और उनमें से well-meaning लोग हैं, people who understand कि SOEs पाकिस्तान के साथ क्या करी हैं, people who can actually lead the process of privatization rather than myself or my secretary doing it. They can lead it sitting on those boards and probably do a better job than we will do from a removed place. But none of them wants to be there. So registry है, उनमें से कितने लोग पब्लिक सेक्टर में के बोर्ड्स पे आने के लिए तैयार हैं, वो एक बहुत बड़ा क्वेश्चन है. और दूसरा क्वेश्चन है कि बोर्ड्स नॉमिनेट कैसे होते हैं. मैं I'll be again slightly brutal. Last जो boards nominate हुए उसमें seats divide की गई board की different political parties के दरमियान. 2 तुम दे दो, 2 तुम दे दो, 1 तुम दे दो, और तुम 2 में से 1 दे दो. This is exactly the way the boards were nominated. And it is very, very difficult. मैं अपनी बात नहीं कर रहा. I'm telling you, you must pity the people who are trying to work with those boards. You must pity those secretaries and those ministers who are here for a very short period, who are trying to work with those boards which have political agendas in terms of every single member or majority. Let me not say every single member. The majority of members nominated there. So, let us also be realistic about the situation that we are working in. इसीलिए मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि जी ये चीज़ें अब वो स्टेज से गुजर चुकी हैं जहाँ पे हम it needs a surgical operation. करेगा कौन? फिर मैं कहूँगा लोग करेंगे, नहीं करेंगे तो फिर खुद ब खुद हो जाएगा जी. I am afraid. It will happen, and it has happened all over the world. That is what the history tells us. Somehow we are not seeing the writing on the wall. We know that we can't afford the state-owned enterprise sector. We are still trying to afford it. We know that we can't run these companies with these kinds of nominations. We will again make a similar kind of nominations when we come to the government the next time. So these are the problems that we are living with, and sessions like this are very good, provided that at least some of the people sitting here form an opinion, go back and try to strive for it. Wherever they are and wherever they are working or wherever they are interacting, they start to say these things.
As a part of reforms, we also think to have a policy on state aid. State aid is different kinds of subsidies, जो tax breaks हम private sector में भी कुछ companies को दे रहे हैं, and as a part of government भी दे रहे हैं, but we don't have any policy on that. Different जब grant के time पे considerations तो होती हैं, but there is no documented state policy. उसकी वजह से they are not time bound, उनके results को हम monitor नहीं कर सकते, और from the ages जो हैं वो चलती जा रही हैं, and they are a big burden on the budget and on the government. So as a part of private sector reforms and public sector reforms, we should consider to have this policy, and we should have a national registry of whatever state aid is being given in different sectors, so that we can track that and we can monitor the results and we can abandon it ultimately. That is my suggestion.
These are all listed in various documents that we have. The supplementary statements of budgets, every government tries to hide this data somehow because they don't want people to know that who they are giving and how they are giving it. So, this is one of the more oblique parts of the budget statements. Dr. Saab शायद ज़्यादा बेहतर तरीके से बता सकेंगे. But this is definitely there. And now with the Right of Information Act, Shahbaz Rana साहब बैठे हुए हैं, अक्सर उसको invoke करते रहते हैं. Probably it is time for you to publish it कि जी ये क्या-क्या दिया जाता है. But amazingly, आपको शायद एहसास नहीं है कि ये शायद दुनिया का इकलौता मुल्क है. पब्लिक सेक्टर की सब्सिडी को छोड़ दें, जहाँ पे हम प्राइवेट सेक्टर एंटिटीज़ को सब्सिडीज़ दे के पिछले 10-10 साल से चला रहे हैं at the expense of the common man. Right? And we are going to continue that unless and until, we simply cannot do it anymore. So, ये reality है, but the data is available. Only thing is we need to look for it.
And my question is that we often tend to talk about economic reforms, but if you take a glance at our history of subcontinent, and even if our current the way of living we are having, then one thing is particularly very common, that we have repulsive nature that is in our inheritance, and that is the biggest hurdle in implementing those reforms. So I think that the future discussions should be on a subject that how we can overcome our repulsive nature so that we can implement those reforms. Thank you.
I think we have more of an obstructive nature. We are not people who are aligned with change. शायद repulsive हम नहीं हैं, लेकिन हमें चेंज बड़ी मुश्किल लगती है, चाहे वो किसी तरह की भी चेंज हो. हमें अच्छा नहीं लगता कि कोई चीज़, हम कहते हैं जिस तरह चीज़ चल रही है उसी तरह चलती रहे, और ये बस रातों रात सुबह मैं उठूं तो ये बेहतर हो जाए. एंड दिस इज़ व्हाट पीपल थिंक कि जी बस ये अगली मर्तबा ये ठीक हो जाएगा. नहीं, ये अगली मर्तबा ठीक नहीं होगा. ये पिछली मर्तबा भी ठीक नहीं हुआ, ये अगली मर्तबा भी ठीक नहीं होगा unless and until we make some conscious efforts.
While it is a great idea to have privatization, I think the government should be very small. I'm not too sure privatization is necessarily the panacea that we make it out to be. I think the greater question is how do we avoid rent seeking? And rent seeking is both in the private sector and in the government sector. We keep talking about this whole business of the state-owned companies. Yes, they probably are a burden of about 400 billion. But let's think about the private sector, how much rent it ekes out of the government. And that's the critical thing. So I think we need to think of in a much holistic, much more holistic manner than simply think in terms of privatization. Because this privatization very often is another way of rent seeking, as I think has been the case of banking sector.
देखें, प्रॉब्लम ये है कि अगर हम कोई चीज़ ठीक तरह से नहीं करें तो उसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि वो नहीं होनी चाहिए. प्राइवेटाइजेशन का लॉ जो है उसका एक एसेंशियल कंपोनेंट ये है कि जब भी सरकार किसी सेक्टर से निकलेगी तो वो वहाँ के लिए एक रेगुलेटरी framework छोड़ के जाएगी. And this is a part of the privatization commission. It is very unfortunate that the privatization commission, while doing the privatization, has never done this. आज तक कभी किसी सेक्टर की प्राइवेटाइजेशन के साथ उस सेक्टर के लिए एक नया रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क नहीं आया. बैंकिंग सेक्टर का रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क जितना भी आया वो इंटरनल कार्टेलाइजेशन या प्रॉफिट मेकिंग या रेंट सीकिंग को कंट्रोल करने के लिए नहीं आया. वो हमारे इंटरनेशनल फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशंस की एक्सेस टू इंफॉर्मेशन के लिए आया. उन्होंने स्टेट बैंक के गवर्नर को सरकार के कंट्रोल से निकाल के अपने ऊपर डिपेंडेंट कर लिया और इन द रिटर्न दे हैव फ्री एक्सेस टू इंफॉर्मेशन व्हिच वी यूज्ड टू एट टाइम इम्पीड. We were not very willing to provide them that information. But no one, and that is something that all of us must ask, that why? Why never an IMF program or a World Bank mission has asked us to cut down on the massive spread that the banks have in Pakistan? You have very rightly said, unparalleled in any other country in the world. And our economy is failing, our private sector is failing, our public sector is failing, our businesses are closing. Our unemployment is increasing by the day. But the banking sector, the money that they have made in last 3 years is unparalleled all over the world. But there is no framework and no international organization has asked us, कि जी ये क्यों नहीं किया आपने? इनको भी तो देखें. In the last year alone, 1,000 billion, more than 1,000 billion of profits in the banking sector. And my counter argument to you, sir, out of them, the lowest profits are the two banks which are in the public sector. और नेशनल बैंक 35 अरब रुपए का प्रॉफिट करता है, हबीब बैंक 300 अरब रुपए का प्रॉफिट करता है. नेशनल बैंक गवर्नमेंट की रजिस्ट्री भी है. प्राइवेटाइजेशन कमीशन का 6 अरब रुपया उधर पड़ा हुआ है जिस पे वो 4% देते हैं इंटरेस्ट. वही अगर हबीब बैंक में पड़ा हो तो 21% वो खुश होकर देंगे आज. But in spite of paying 4% on hundreds of billions of public money, the National Bank is still not being able to make profits. And if they make profits, those are very small compared to their size. So, while the rent seeking and cartelization of the private sector requires to be controlled, and there are institutions and there are frameworks which have to be put in place, let me, say it with some pride that for the aviation sector, we are already working on a post-privatization regulatory framework, which can ensure that there is no profit-seeking or cartelization between the private airlines once the PI is not there, or which can ensure that areas which are underserved will still continue to have the flights. And, all this is possible. So it is just that the government needs to probably work better on its role.
That there are two major areas where the SOC's losses are there. One is the DESCOs, and other is the steel mill and the PIA. I will talk about two. DESCO, there is no privatization involved if you just do one thing and give it to the provinces, because provinces can collect the money because they have the police under their control, they have the patwari even, you can even reach to the village level, so there will be no fault, And and for that you just have to issue one notification that from tomorrow, these will just report from Ministry of Water and Power in federal government to the concerned power department. So the things will be over. So the second thing I am saying about the steel mill. That steel mill, in 2016 it was shut down while you were in the government. And what was in the back of mind to shut it down when the people were not given the VSR and VSS, and they were not released? And just I think yesterday I was reading in some newspaper that about 6 billion rupees in the shape of pays and salaries and allowances have been paid to those people so far. So what was in the mind of the people at that time? To shut it down in such a hurry way,
I wish it was so simple. Provincialization का issue जी पिछले 1.5 साल से डिबेट में रहा. And then the last government decided at one place, कि जी, we are going to provincialize it. So they talked to the provinces. So the provinces, you know, one out of the provinces said, which was Sindh in this case, कि जी हाँ हम बिल्कुल हम we are ready to accept them under the provincial fold. दो काम सिर्फ कर लें. एक तो यह है कि जितने इनके accumulated losses हैं वो federal government जिम्मेदार होगी. You know, we are not going to be responsible. But this was not the all. The next demand that they said that for the next 5 years, please continue to bear the losses and give it to us. So, you know, जो कुछ अखबारों में आता है, वो शायद उतना reality को represent नहीं करता जितना, and to tell you very honestly, I don't think that the provincialization of the power sector is an answer. It will probably result into the worst kind of cartelization if it is done. Because it will go from public sector in the federal government to public sector in the provincial government, and then it will be privatized there. I do not need to say anything further, ji. Then, जो finally Arshad Dar साहब ने बात की कि जी restructure the federal government. I am a great advocate of that. Ji. I honestly think that this size of our country, the province of Punjab for that matter, is bigger than 110 countries in the world, both in terms of population and also in terms of, you know, many other denominators. So, yes, it should be done as of yesterday. It should have been done much earlier. चूँकि ये आज का subject नहीं था, तो इसलिए मैंने इस पे बात नहीं. I just hinted towards it that reduce the size of the federal. This is also Dr. Sadia ने जो बात की थी. Reduce the size of the federal and provincial governments, but I said increase the size of the local government, right? Because that is where the service delivery has to take place, and that is where the resources have to travel if you really want the people to benefit from it. So, ये debates लंबी हैं. Honestly, one would feel like talking more on these subjects, but Dr. Saab has to speak, who probably has more experience than anybody out of us. But thank you all for a very healthy debate and for all the questions that cropped up. I think it will enable us, all of us, to think more and probably come up with some better answers the next time we get together on a forum.
Madam Nadia, thank you. आपने common man की बात की, बड़ा अच्छा लगा. उसको मैं थोड़ा सा आगे ज़रा करना चाहती हूँ कि हमें feminist perspectives भी include करने चाहिए. इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि एक अलग डरबा बना के chamber of women, वो women chamber of commerce जो कि हमें पता है किस तरह वो बनते हैं और क्यों बनते हैं, तो इसके मुतालिक भी बात होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि पाकिस्तान is a second worst country on gender inequality index. Thank you.
I am not feminist. I am human. And my message to all the women, compete and don't ask for a special treatment. We are not differently able people. We can compete in our own right.